Hey everyone, welcome to Meet the Makers, our series of interviews with the producers and artists from the Elgin Fringe Festival. I'm Nick Mataragas, the artistic director of the festival. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon, or this noon as it is. Today we are joined by none other than MsPixy herself, the host and showrunner of MsPixy's big effing royalty-free public domain fair use burlesque show, which I had to read off of paper because there's no way I was going to memorize that entire title. So
I do that for
welcome.
fun. Thank you. It's so lovely to be here in my own home, talking to you.
Right?
It's delightful.
It is. It is a delight to speak to you. And I just want to say that personally, I'm a huge fan of your work. In fact, part of the reason I started doing Fringe festivals was seeing your show the first time I came to a Fringe festival. So,
Oh, thank you.
um,
I didn't know
yeah,
that. That makes me so happy.
yeah. We a friend and I both came here to Elgin to watch a couple of shows, and she goes, "Hey, you want to go watch the burlesque show?" And I'm like, "What's burlesque?" And she's like, "Oh, you have to go."
Oh, that must have been a very delightful night for you.
It was very delightful.
I mean, not to toot the horn of my own show, but like the first time you see burlesque, especially if you were not expecting to see it that day, you went from I know nothing about burlesque to now I'm seeing it. I think that's a really good day.
It was a very very good day, and your show is something that I think festival goers always get excited about every year. You know, it's always a big draw at the festival, and we're always excited to have you. Um, and have you been? How long have you been doing the festival? Have you been doing it from its inception, or?
I think the first or maybe second year, but I think I've been doing it since the first year. Yes, and we do like to cram a room full of sweaty bodies and get everybody having a good time, real close up together. So that was different this year than what we
Yeah,
usually do.
very different. And actually, your show over the years has kind of evolved. I remember the first time I saw it, it was much more of a traditional format where you'd have the dancers come up and perform, and then, that was basically the entire format. Whereas it's evolved into a party.
Yes, it has gotten weirder and I think more fun. I mean, if I was going away from fun, that would probably be a bad move as a producer and director,
Hmm.
at least for this context, because our whole goal is to connect the audience with one another through us. So even though, yes, there is striptease performance, and yes, it is fucking delightful, often at our show, we'll have scavenger hunts, games where the audience has to get to know one another as well as the performers when we're off stage mingling in the crowd, opportunities for the audience to make and share their own art. Some years we've made little fascinators and had them do crafting competitions. Some years we've done mask competitions and a parade of masks and such. This year we are in the internet trying to reach people through the screen and somehow connect that way.
Yeah, and I think a lot of your performers and yourself embrace that idea of this is a different format, and how can we use that in a different way. You have some very interesting pieces, but at the same time, I think that's something that is kind of signature to your shows already. Like, having seen quite a few of your shows now, you definitely pick pieces that aren't necessarily traditional burlesque or traditional striptease, but are kind of an evolution of them in interesting directions. How do
Yeah.
you how do
That
you find those people?
How do I find those people? Oh no, that's a great question. So you're correct. I always want a few pieces in my shows that will evoke what audiences tend to think of as classic burlesque. So parade and peel, wearing fancy, yeah, I'm wearing a fancy gown. It's hard to see. Wearing a fancy gown, numbers, or things where we're doing boas, fans. But in one of my shows, I would expect that would be a third or less of the performances. And then everything else, I want to dig into all the other things that make up burlesque, which includes variety performance, things like neo burlesque, which is burlesque with more of a modern twist. But where my heart is happy are the things that get very close to performance art in other ways, things that explore burlesque through the lens of horror or burlesque through the lens of gender fuckery or burlesque through the lens of perception shift. We think we are in one place, and by the end of the act, we are experiencing something totally other than where we thought we were going to be. So I've been performing and producing burlesque since 2001, which is surprising given that I'm still barely over the age of 25. So, and yet I've been over 18 this whole time. So being a vampire does have its advantages in that respect. But over that time, I've been very picky about who I will work with. For me, an excellent, and this is not true for all art. I know some great art has been made by some shitty people being horrible to each other. But for me, great art comes from people who are working together, a cast or an ensemble who's really excited to be in the same space as each other, who's really excited to watch each other perform, and who is as enthusiastic about the entire product and group and process as they are about their own work. So, you know, in years and years and years and years of booking performances, those people stand out the second they come through the door. They bring in a wonderful energy. They are innovative with their ideas because they are willing to give and take with other people. So their ideas no longer are just theirs. They are ideas that have been processed through the concepts in the community. And you know, after a while saying I will only work with people like that, suddenly you find you have a wonderful group of talented performers to choose from when it's time to put on the show. And you find those performers bring you more kindred spirits, more people like they are who will be an asset to your show. And then from there, in the show, I just go to my group of performers and I look for balance in what I'm going to present in a show. Balance in body types, balance in gender presentations, balance in cultures, ethnicities being represented, and balance in different types of burlesque. Which means that what should be, hey, I'm gonna pick 10 things and put them in an order, is actually a very complex process from beginning to end to get a show that feels spontaneous and organic, but also really does show you the whole face of burlesque as much as you can in like an hour.
But I think that's I think you put that very well, and I think that speaks a lot to your talent. Which not only are you an amazing MC for burlesque shows, but you obviously are a very good curator of variety performances like this. This is, you know, it's something that you can tell you really thought about and put together all of these things. You mentioned horror, and I think one of the most eye-catching and interesting pieces in this show is a full-blown horror piece. It's like beyond I don't even know how to describe it. Could you maybe tell me a little bit more about that piece?
I assume you're talking about Red Rum, correct?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, Red Rum is a performance artist who primarily expresses themselves through burlesque. And the form of burlesque they do, we often call gorelesque or horrorlesque. And it draws on a lot of horror influences, ranging from, you know, really serious and like classical horror, like you will see if you watch MsPixy's big fucking public domain royalty-free fair use burlesque show, or also like all the way to Ghostbusters and being Gozer from Ghostbusters, or there's Red Room has a Gold Rush number, like Old West Gold Rush covered in gold powder, but even in that, they are doing a twist on that concept that embodies their aesthetic into it. I think I put those words in the wrong order, but you get the idea. And that, like you were saying before, those are the kind of performers I look for, are performers who have a strong point of view that comes through in all of their numbers and then can express that point of view in many, many varied ways.
Yeah, I think that this show definitely expresses that very well, including artists who, as you continue to point out during the show, kept breaking your rules that you said about what they could put into the show. How did that happen? Like you set up these rules, and
the rules are mostly for myself. When I put out the call, I say things like, I want to see a curated space around you. So not necessarily it needs to be like a staged space or necessarily needs to be a certain kind of space. But if you're going for, this is my living room, then I've set up my living room in a way that invites you into my living room and is an intentional display of my living room. Or if you're doing a number on your bed, you have thought about what is the idea of bed as burlesque? What is the idea of sleep as burlesque? And that is a clear, specific choice versus my bed is here and beds are sexy, so I will do a number on the bed. So those are two examples, for people who have not seen the show yet, those are two examples of things where I kind of broke my own rule of like, no numbers that are just on beds, no numbers that are just in living rooms, because the performers are making specific intentional choices. Nothing is accidental.
And I think you mentioning the bed piece specifically to me was the one that stood out, and it's the opening piece of the show, the opening dance of the show, and it's such an interesting approach to it because it's a composed dance, but it also just feels like someone, in their bed. And I think that was really cool. Plus, it was grungy, and like my friend and I, who are both huge, like we traditionally go to see your show every year. We ended up sitting down and drinking wine, watching the show. That was our plan. We're like, this is us pretending to go to the festival this year. And she's just like, this is like totally me. And I'm like, I get that. And so that kind of brought that new level to it, which is really cool.
Yes, it's wonderful. And May the Force, who performed that number, is new to us because now we are on the internet. So we are not limited to people who can be physically here in this city, in this space at this time. We can take performers who can pre-record their numbers, even if they would not normally be available during the festival. Or we can take performers from New York, performers from all across the country. And you would think I would know off the top of my head where all the performers in my show were from this time. But I don't want to say the wrong person is from the wrong place, but I will say we have multiple cities in the Midwest represented, and both coasts are in the show as well.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's very interesting. Were these people that you already knew about? Like, how big is the burlesque community, like, across the country? Like, did you already know these people, or were they people you found?
That is quite a wormhole of a question. How big is the burlesque community? So the show that I put up for this year's Elgin Fringe Fest represents about 50% people I know and am familiar with and have worked with for many years, and about 50% people who are new to me or new-ish to me. I do create a casting call, like most shows that have auditions. I put the casting call out. The way MsPixy Productions works is usually I put the call out first to the performers I know and am familiar with, and then I will do a second casting round for new performers once I see what I already have in the show and what type of new material I need. So I put out very detailed casting calls. One qualification for being in my shows is have the patience to read my whole casting call. If they can do that, they're halfway there. And then turn in their materials, and then I select from there and I let performers know. And this is a good process because sometimes I will find like there are 2 or 3 numbers that were not in this show, but may end up in another one of my shows in the future. Or I might see a performer now and be like, they're not ready for what I'm doing right now, but I'm going to keep this person on my list in a year after they've had a little more time. I know they're going to be spectacular and ready to go. So that's part of the fun of having a casting call. And of course, the other fun is that I just get to sit and watch burlesque dancers perform for like 3 hours while I review submissions. That's a pretty good time.
That sounds like a great time. Yeah. So a lot of these pieces you mentioned people from all over, and I know one I know specifically, I think came from Oakland, California, and it involves politics in the burlesque.
Sure does.
So interesting. Like, I mean, obviously this is a Fringe festival, and artists are like, it's do what you want to do. Is that kind of was your approach to that as well, or did you have to think about whether or not you were going to put that in, or was it just immediately like this is going into the show?
Well, I didn't have to think about it, but I agree strongly with the sentiment expressed in the number. Other producers might put more thought into it. I don't know. But for me, the purpose of art is to communicate with the audience and ideally influence, if not change, then self-examination. So why do I feel the way I feel when I'm watching this number? What is this bringing up in me when I see this number? Oh, I never looked at it from that point of view. Now, again, for people who haven't seen this number, it's not particularly subtle. It's not like a delicate exploration of political themes. It's like, fuck this. How do we get out of this fucking mess? May as well strip while we're stuck here. and let's just all just revel in the moment for that with that. But for me, burlesque is inherently political. The act of celebrating one's own physical body in a culture that focuses on you must change yourself so we can sell you a product. I think just to be like, no, I look great and here's my belly fat and it looks great is a political statement. So for me, that's not super different from a number that's like, fuck the president, he's doing a shitty job. And I think maybe some people even find some of the other performances more shocking than that one, since it's not such a new sentiment right now. But again, it's part of the performance too is also catharsis, is to be able to be that person for a minute that you are watching perform and to be like, fuck yeah, that's exactly how I feel right now. And I think that's a valuable purpose of political burlesque. A valuable purpose of political burlesque as well is to let people kind of inhabit the skin of somebody who is ready to just get on stage and be like, fuck this noise.
That's actually really well put. Yeah, I totally see that. Now, I think one of the people who embraced the virtual nature of the show more than anyone was you yourself. Your piece definitely involved some green screening in different ways. So maybe can you take me through the process of how you created your own piece?
Well, let me tell you something. Several things were happening at once. We were in the middle of purchasing and moving to a new home. We were ending the summer and preparing for a virtual school year. I was finishing up work on another show and starting work on this show. And I was doing all of my work between the hours of 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. So just a little setup for what's happening in my life around the recording of this. I knew I wanted to do something. I knew I wanted to do something. It's been, and this is my first solo number that I have created for virtual performance. And I knew I wanted to play with these tools of green screen, blue screen, being able to layer those things, which is a skill I learned at 2 a.m. just recently. And I knew I wanted to be about this feeling of invisibility right now, and this feeling that there is this crowd, there is a group of people out there that we cannot, or depending on who you are and what your life choices are, that I cannot be a part of, that crowd is moving and interacting and touching and being together. And I feel very isolated. I feel very alone. I feel very invisible. And I think a lot of people who do what I do, who are used to being on stage in front of an audience and giving the give and take, hearing the audience, and for us, most of us feeling the audience kind of in our guts, we feel so disconnected now that we are performing either in advance for just a camera or even live on Zoom, but people become like statements in a chat or little flickering emojis at the corners of our vision. And so I didn't, I should have, but I did not plan the arc of the number in advance. Instead, I kind of went in and recorded a bunch of different things around that theme for me. And then everything else I put in editing kind of based on like the feelings in my gut. So I was looking for themes of nature, themes of change, themes of feeling electric or exploding, and themes of that like nature versus human choice, I guess. It got real artsy around 1 a.m. most nights. And I had a lot of fun playing with the tools of green and blue screen, and based on what I've done on this number, I'm hoping to go back, revisit this, and come at the concept again with a little bit more planning and arc behind it to do something even next level up. But we'll see, because, everything.
Right. I think that's very interesting because I think, talking about you didn't have a plan. I think that plays into it with this specific one because there's a sense of humanness and vulnerability to it, and I think that kind of helped that as well. You mentioned this idea of feeding off the audience, and I think that's something I've talked to some other artists about as well. But like, how different is it? Like, really, is it to have something where you're not feeling that audience right away?
It is anguishing for me because I am a person who made a choice to be a live performer and not a screen performer. I've been through phases, you know, over the years where I was like, well, maybe I should try commercial acting. Maybe I should try television. Maybe I should try film, but I don't, those mediums don't speak to me the way live performance does and always has. So being forced into the virtual space is anguishing and painful for me as a performer. And that doesn't mean it's without value, and it doesn't mean that I haven't found ways that I think we can make quality art and connect with people. But it does feel like being ripped from your home and plopped down someplace else, and then expected to find the tools to survive wherever you are. Good luck. It's like Naked and Afraid, but it's like we want to be naked and we're having a lot of difficulty.
It's not the fear of like centipedes and stuff. It's the fear of no one reacting.
This is a true fact about burlesque dancers. We do not have dreams, like stress dreams, that we are naked. We have stress dreams that we cannot get naked. Like, it is a universal truth among burlesque dancers. We will have dreams that our costume won't come off, that our costume is wet, that we are changing costumes and we have all the wrong pieces. Like, there is a whole laundry list of recurring dreams burlesque performers have, but almost all of them involve us trying to be naked and failing.
That is amazing to think about. That classic failure dream basically being turned on its head that way. That's
I'm
amazing.
on stage and my clothes won't come off.
All these people want to see me naked. Why can't I?
Nobody is laughing at me. Why isn't anyone laughing at me?
That is so great. So I think one of the things that, as hard as this whole shutdown has been for live performers, I think it's creating, new ideas, new concepts of how we do things. Have you found things that you've figured out during this time of doing virtual stuff that you're like, hey, once we get back to live, I could incorporate this into the show somehow?
I do like to incorporate media as much as possible. So it's been nice to see that now everybody I'm working with is going to have some tools for that. If I wanted to have pieces if I want to have a show where I have a live piece and then a piece on film, or a live piece, for me, I would love to do a live piece that interacts with a piece on film, which is certainly not a new concept in performance or art, but would be a lot of fun to play with for burlesque. And I love the idea of using projection as a design element as well. So that's something I would love to bring back. What I've learned here and play with a little more is just projection as part of the performance ambiance in this space. Everybody's getting better at editing things. Or some of us are staying the same at it while everyone else catches up. I am not one of the ones who's waiting for people to catch up. I'm one of the ones Googling, how do I stop this program from doing this to all my clips? Right. Oh God, all the sound on all my clips is gone. Yeah. So that's and then again, it's been really great to work with people from everywhere. To be outside of our geographical borders. And I think that is going to maintain beyond the end of, hopefully the end that will happen, I am certain, of all of this, is those connections we've made with people in other cities will stay. And to answer your earlier question, there is a very big, very connected burlesque community across the United States and internationally, but it is definitely becoming much more connected now that we are online all the time. Cool.
That's awesome. We have a comment question combination here from the Facebook live feed. So I just want to read that out. So Aaron posted, hi, you two. I've known Pixie Belmont Leo for 800 years and worked with all her amazing artists 1,200 times or 12,000 times. I have laughed and cried and squealed and all the other things at their work, and I love it so. That said, one of the most inspiring bits of working with all of them is watching them deal with guff, audience nonsense, community nonsense, and so on. The strength and wit they bring to our space has empowered me and my organization on so many levels. How do all these peeps get so freaking tough?
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Aaron. I want to save that comment and so I can put it on my wall. You won't blushing. Well, this is maybe more information than I should share publicly, but in addition to being on the stage, I'm often in classrooms a lot. These are related skills. Treating an audience member who is acting out like a young person who is acting out is a surprisingly effective way to deal with audience harassment. Because rather than try to shut someone down, you redirect them. You send them in a new direction. You don't ignore them, but you also don't necessarily engage them. You just identify the new behavior that you would like them to do, and you point them towards that behavior with a gentle shove. So, you know, if somebody's commenting a whole lot, they'll mention like, oh, I hear you have so much to say today. I can't wait to talk to you after the show. That's when I'll talk to you. Because right now I'm hosting the show, you see, and I can't have a conversation. That is usually enough, because most people who are doing that, they just want to be noticed. They just want to be the special person who got attention. So they can have their tiny bits of attention, and then they can have an arrow pointing to where more attention will be if they behave themselves. If they keep misbehaving, they get no more attention. And a quality burlesque space will have somebody on hand who can remove persons who are truly belligerent from the space. And that's something that's very important in the burlesque community, is that there be somebody there for performer safety who we know is their job. If things go off the rails, this person will step in. But a good host can diffuse most, like I'd say 90-95% of that kind of like obnoxiousness right off the bat. And then in terms of dealing with community, you know, antics, that goes right back to the performers I choose. I look for performers who do not bring drama into backstage. I look for performers who see drama and step to the side of that drama. And I look for performers who have a clear moral compass of their own, and stick to that moral compass. That's not the same moral compass for everybody, but you'll find a lot of my performers, if you follow them online, have a political mission or have a personal mission or have an ethical mission that they pursue through their burlesque work. And so people who do that tend to avoid drama because it will interrupt their mission and take away credibility from the good work they're trying to do.
I think you bring up a very good point there too at the end. I think producers in general, and I just knowing what you said and what I've done as a producer as well, this is for anybody that's trying to be a performer of any kind. Producers don't just look for your talent and your ability, but we also care about how you interact with people and how you treat the others around you and your attitude. And I think that's like, you may get a role or a gig once just on your talent alone, but after that, it's like, do I want to work with that person again?
Yes, and for me, it's very important that when a performer comes into my backstage, they know they are going to a safe space, and they know that if it is not a safe space, they will be able to come to me and say, I don't feel comfortable, and I will take action to fix the problem. And I think, I mean, I'm not one of my performers because I can't be outside of my body yet. So working on astral projection. But I do think that's where we're at, just based on the feedback I've had from my performers about the way they feel in our backstage atmosphere. And that goes back to what I said in the beginning. While I do acknowledge that some good art has been created by assholes, in general, you will get good art if you bring together people who are happy and comfortable together and feel like they can really express their own art without fear of negative repercussions, reprisals, etc.
Absolutely. And I think especially right now, when in the last 5 to 7 years, we've seen so many companies in the entertainment industry that weren't safe spaces and how they've just imploded on themselves. It's been uncanny. And there's this weird stigma of, I will work where I can work, even if it's not like, that is changing right now, because people are finally, yes, people are finally holding these people accountable for not being good to the people they work with. And I think that's super important right now. So it's always really great. And I think you mentioned your performers, and, you know, just seeing the way that the performers interact with each other, even like at the Martini room, like if they're about to come out, they're just talking to each other and they seem happy. And, you know, that's something you don't always see with productions. And I think that's just such a great thing to see.
It's super important to me. And let's be honest, I'm not making millions of dollars doing this. Like I have no incentive to treat people badly or make people feel bad about what they're doing. My goal is 100% to make sure I have artists who are supported and comfortable, and then they will be great.
Yeah.
So that's nice.
Yes. Oh, definitely.
That's helpful.
Definitely a good thing. So there is one thing I've kind of been ignoring this entire interview, and that's kind of the elephant in the room, which is your co-host there, Giant Martini, who has become a signature part of your show. How did how did you meet Giant Martini? How did Giant Martini become part of the show?
Okay, so a long time ago, I was part of a show called the Belmont Burlesque Review. I was original cast member, and we had a director, but we worked as a group to kind of co-produce the show. And then our director was the person who would be like, yes or no, when we had disagreements. And so we had a host who was basically a cast member who we performers hired to host. And then the host had a sidekick, a real person. And there was a lot of banter between the host and the sidekick. And it was cute and we loved it. It was a good part of the show. So at a certain point, that host had to go out. And at that time, I was doing hosting and MC work for the Chicago Improv Festival. And that's where I actually started as a host. So I have a lot of background in improv. So I stepped into host, and then the sidekick had to go out. And that was like very last minute. So there was nobody to be the sidekick. And we tried some people we knew, and none of them were available. So like literally I looked around the room and I was like, I need somebody who I can play off of. And I picked up this Giant Martini glass. And I kind of on a whim, as I started the show, I introduced Giant Martini to the audience, and they took to him right away. I mean, I spent years hosting and emceeing before the audience really warmed up to me, but Giant Martini was an instant hit. His Facebook page often has more fans than mine, which can you blame them? And he helps me get through the show. Some people are surprised to learn that Giant Martini is a he, but I will not argue with Giant Martini about what he tells me his gender is. And Giant Martini has very strong opinions, but the most helpful thing about Giant Martini is when I have no ideas.
And that
Giant Martini helps me get ideas.
That is perfect. And I think I've seen that in your shows where you'll just take a beat with Giant Martini and the audience just loves that. They just go for it immediately. So it's such an amazing discovery to have found a silent yet loved co-host. I think that's anybody that wants a spotlight would love to have a co-host like that, I think.
Does that mean Giant Martini is my silent Bob?
Kind of, except for Giant Martini never says anything like at all, whereas Bob will say something.
That's true. Bob occasionally has a line here or there.
But that is a good analogy. Is
yes.
Silent Bob. That is fantastic.
I guess that means Giant Martini is the straight man.
Yeah, I didn't know you had such an extensive background in improv.
Oh yes, that's how I ended up in Chicago in the first place. Is a love of improv and an interest in doing. I've trained at Second City in comedy sports, not IO. And if you don't know why not IO, just go to the internet and search some things about that. Actually, comedy sports was wonderful training. Second City training, I learned many things. Some about what happens on stage and some about what happens off stage. I had some wonderful teachers there.
Yeah, that sounds about right for Second City.
And then I worked with the Chicago Improv Festival for a very long time. That became Chicago Improv Productions, and I believe they closed their doors like about a year ago. Mm-hmm. I've got to double check that. Don't get mad at me, Jonathan Pitts, if you are watching. And I ran some small festivals within that festival at a certain point. And for me, what I do on stage is 1000% based in what I've learned doing improv, but the audience is my scene partner. So when we're talking about yes and, when we're talking about give and take, we're talking about that interaction relationship with the audience. And of course, my castmates, but I am more often interacting with the audience than I am interacting directly with my castmates.
And I think that's interesting. I feel like I should have realized you had a bigger improv background than I thought, just because of the way you host and you interact with the audience, because it is very fluid and very, very well done. And I think you bring up an interesting point with the different theaters in Chicago with improv as well, and the way you talked about Second City and the issues with the IO, which is no longer with us anymore. And you mentioned comedy sports, and that's the one thing I think a lot of people that are outside of the community don't realize. Like comedy sports has a certain stigma as a performance venue, but it also has this incredible group of people who, like, anybody that does stuff at comedy sports loves the people at comedy sports, it seems like, and it's such an amazing thing.
Well, and I realize we've gone off the burlesque rails a little bit here, but
A little bit.
comedy sports has this stigma because often people who get into improv believe that long form improv is real improv and short form is beginner improv or basics improv. My heart belongs to short form. I love long form, but long form can be much more entertaining for the performers than the audience sometimes. And what short form does is set up a nice, safe space where it's easy to be successful at almost any level. But that doesn't mean that an advanced short form performer can't blow your fucking mind doing short form. And the other thing about comedy sports was they had a really well-organized training program with really clear curriculum. So I knew what I was doing in level 2 was going to build on my level 1 skills. Level 3 was going to build on level 2. And the skills were very clearly outlined and delineated. And the games we played were very clearly supporting and building those skills. And so that for me was much more valuable than making connections with certain people or, getting into a group that could do long form and hope that someday we would be the groundlings and then someday somehow that would turn into a movie career or whatever. And then those are life skills for me. That's not just stage skills. The things I've learned for people who are new to improv, yes, and give and take, the concept, it's not a mistake, it's a gift, right? Something that goes wrong can become the best moment in the show. All of those things I carry with me in my daily life and are more like a religion or philosophy to me than any world religion or philosophy I've studied. And I've studied a few.
That is actually a fantastic point, and that idea of those rules of improv kind of being life lessons, and I'm a big fan of the fact that mistakes happen and you just have to embrace them and go with them and kind of steer into the skid, as some would say, which is such a great great point to make. And I think your show really works well with all those tenets, and I think you've put together a fantastic show this year, just like every year, to be honest. Let's be real.
They're so nice. I wish all my interviews I ever did were like this. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So if you haven't seen MsPixy's show, it is MsPixy's big fucking royalty-free, public domain, fair use burlesque show. You can find it on elginfringefestival.com. It's only $5 to see, but you can also tip all of the performers. They have Venmo or whatever, however they take their money handles in the performance. So if you're blown away by something specific in the show, please feel free to tip them. Also, that $5 goes back to the artist as well. So make sure you do that. Also, if you want to see the entire festival, it's only $50 to see the entire festival. So do that as well. If you are in the Elgin area, come out to the gallery here and see the visual part of the Elgin Fringe Festival. The gallery's open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So come out and check that out. I just want to thank MsPixy once again and Giant Martini. It's always great to see both of you. And thank you all for watching. You guys, I hope you are getting as much out of this interview series as I am, because I'm loving it. Our next interview is tomorrow at noon. And I won't be doing the interviewing. I'm actually going to be the one being interviewed, which is going to be weird and interesting.
It's very exciting.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited. It means I don't have to do any work ahead of time for that interview, which is nice. So I will see you tomorrow at noon. Thank you again, MsPixy.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.